Welcome to the Sleep to Dream Analytics Explainer video, where better sleep starts with better understanding. Getting a good night's sleep, that's the easy part. But trying to get help for your sleep, man, that can feel like a total nightmare. If you've been there, you are definitely not alone. So today, we're going to try and unravel this incredibly complex world of sleep medicine right here in the US and figure out why it is so hard to navigate. Seriously, why is it so complicated? If you've ever tried to get help for a sleep issue, I'm guessing this question really hits home. I mean, it should be simple, right? You've got a problem, you go see a doctor, you get a solution. But no, the reality, it's this confusing, frustrating maze. So what is actually going on here? Okay, the short answer is this. The whole system is just fragmented. It's broken up into a million little pieces. Imagine a machine, but every single gear is made by a different company that doesn't talk to the others. You've got insurance companies over here, doctors over there, the testing labs somewhere else, and then the folks who supply the equipment. And they are all playing by different, sometimes totally conflicting sets of rules. It's a system that's almost designed to check and balance itself. And a lot of that comes from this deep-seated fear of fraud. All right, to really get a handle on this, let's do something. Let's walk through this whole process, like we're the patient, right from the very beginning. We're calling this section Entering the Sleep Maze, because honestly, that's exactly what it feels like. And right out of the gate, you slam into these 4 huge roadblocks. You've got state licensing rules, which are all over the place. Then you have these insane insurance reimbursement conditions that decide who pays for what. And on top of all that, there's this thick web of super strict fraud and abuse laws, plus rules about self-referrals. Every single one of these just adds another layer of headaches to the whole process. So let's tackle the very first hurdle, just getting a diagnosis. You'd think this would be the easy part, right? Well, think again. So before you can even think about getting a sleep test, you have to have a face-to-face meeting with a doctor. But here's the catch. That doctor has to take ridiculously detailed notes, and these notes aren't really for their own files. No, they're for the insurance companies, especially Medicare. They have this very specific, non-negotiable checklist, and if it's not filled out perfectly, they won't even consider paying for your test. And how specific are we talking? Well, check this out. This is a direct quote from a Medicare policy in Florida. It basically says that if your doctor forgets to write down your neck circumference, your BMI, or something called an Epworth score, your sleep test is considered not medically necessary. Let that sink in. It doesn't matter how tired you are or what your symptoms are. If the paperwork isn't perfect, it's a no-go. So what this really means is your doctor is basically a glorified box checker in this situation. They have to document everything. Your sleep history, that Epworth score, your BMI, your neck size, a focused cardiopulmonary evaluation, an upper airway evaluation, the list goes on. If they miss just one of those boxes, the whole process can just grind to a screeching halt. Okay, so let's say by some miracle the test gets approved. Now you have another choice. You can do the in-lab test, the polysomnogram, or PSG, which is kind of the gold standard, but it's super expensive and a huge pain. Or you can do a home sleep test, or HST, which is way cheaper and much more convenient. Now, take a wild guess which one the insurance companies are pushing for. Yeah, they are all about steering patients toward that cheaper home option. All right, so that's just getting the diagnosis, which is already a huge puzzle. But now let's zoom out a bit, because believe it or not, it gets even more complicated. The entire regulatory landscape is just this crazy patchwork of different and often totally contradictory rules. I mean, the rules for a sleep lab in, say, Florida could be completely different from the rules in New York, or California, or Texas. These state-by-state rules cover literally everything, from who is even allowed to own a lab to what kind of fancy certification a doctor needs just to read your test results. And just to show you how extreme this can get, the source material we're looking at points to one state in particular. It calls Oklahoma's law the most intrusive in the nation. So what on earth is going on in Oklahoma that makes it so different? Well, in Oklahoma, they've set the bar incredibly high. Sleep labs have to have these very specific accreditations. But here's the real kicker. Only a doctor who is board certified specifically in sleep medicine can legally interpret a sleep test. In a lot of other states, other types of doctors can do it, but not in Oklahoma. And what does that do? It creates huge bottlenecks and makes it way harder for patients to get a diagnosis quickly. Okay, let's fast forward. You've somehow navigated the maze, you got your diagnosis. and you need a CPAP machine. You're in the clear, right? Home stretch? Not so fast. Now you've hit the treatment roadblock. And this is where we have to learn a new acronym. It's DME, which stands for Durable Medical Equipment. See, a CPAP machine isn't just a treatment in the eyes of the law, it's classified as DME. And trust me, that one little classification changes absolutely everything. So why is this little label such a big deal? Because the second something gets called DME, it triggers this whole other set of powerful federal anti-fraud laws. Remember that fear of fraud we talked about? Well, here it is, front and center. And this really gets us to the heart of the matter, the fundamental reason for all this complexity. The entire system, from top to bottom, is built on a foundation of distrust. Yeah, the source material we're drawing from puts it pretty bluntly. The government essentially sees the whole field of sleep medicine, the tests, the treatments, the CPAP machines, as ripe for fraud and abuse. And that means all these complicated rules, they're not a bug, they're a feature. They are deliberately in place to try and stop financial scams. There are two big federal laws that create the most trouble here. First, you've got the Stark Law. In simple terms, it stops doctors from referring their patients for something like DME to a company they own or have a financial stake in. Then you've got the anti-kickback statute, which is even broader. It basically says you can't pay or receive anything of value to get patient referrals. Put them together, and these two laws build a giant wall right between getting a diagnosis and getting treatment. So what does this actually mean for you, the patient? It means that the very same doctor who helped you navigate that whole diagnostic maze is often legally forbidden from giving you the CPAP machine you need. They have to send you somewhere else entirely, to a totally separate company. It just adds one more frustrating, time-consuming step to the whole ordeal. And you might be wondering, why does everyone follow these ridiculously complex rules so carefully? Well, it's because the penalties for breaking them are, let's just say they're not a slap on the wrist. They're incredibly severe. Just one criminal violation of that anti-kickback statute, we're talking a maximum fine of $25 grand. And on top of that, up to 5 years in prison. With penalties like that, you can see why doctors and suppliers are going to be extra cautious, even if all that caution makes the patient's journey so much harder. And all of this leaves us with one big central question. You know, this whole system was built to prevent fraud, right? To protect patients and taxpayers. But you have to ask, in the real world, does this incredibly complex maze of rules actually end up just creating so many barriers that it stops people from getting the care they desperately need when they need it? It's a fundamental conflict, really, right at the heart of the American healthcare system. Thank you for watching the Sleep to Dream Analytics Explainer video. We hope you sleep well and dream easy.